All righty, welcome everyone. I'm Alex Torres, Program Director for Humanities AMPed. We are so excited to share with each other what we've learned in our AMP Summer Institute. Since we are online, we ask that you keep yourselves muted and with your cameras off unless you are presenting. This way the focus is on the presenters. Mics and cameras off is the equivalent of letting them have the stage. Also, please note that this session is being recorded. Please make use of the chat feature located on the right side of your screen to give comments, questions, and praise. Speaking of virtual stages, I'd now like to turn over the stage to Taylor Scott, a community educator and poet, to help us get grounded with a poem. We ask that you sit up comfortably, place your feet firm on the ground. If you haven't unmuted yourself or dropped your camera yet, then please do so. So sit up comfortably, place your feet firmly on the ground, close your eyes if you feel called to, and breathe deeply as Taylor reads. Whenever you're ready, Taylor.
Thank you, Alex. So yeah, this is called the Acknowledgement Poem, and I feel grateful that I'm able to read it with you all this morning. For those standing with us who are Black, we are breathing with you. For those who are immigrants, who are Native, we are breathing with you. For those of us who are women, who are trans, who are queer, we are breathing with you. For those who are differently abled, we are breathing with you. For those who know what it is like to stand outside the circle, we are breathing with you. We have come to this space to enter into true solidarity with one another. A true solidarity is not easy, nor should it be. May we become worthy of one another's solidarity as we breathe together. Breathe and feel the ground beneath your feet. For this land is shaped through the ongoing process of colonization. We remember these roots. In Baton Rouge, we stand on the unceded land of the Bayou Gula tribe, part of the proud Choctaw Nation and the elders before them. We remember these roots. For this land was cultivated through the labor of enslaved Africans who fought for freedom and imagined a better world for their descendants. We remember these roots. We show up to be truth tellers here. We show up to reach beyond ourselves and bravely dream a better world that honors breath and roots. This work will not be over in our lifetimes. We accept this fact and move forward in a spirit of hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taylor. We certainly are in a historic moment when we cannot take our breaths for granted. So I'm happy to be breathing here with you all. Now, I'd like to call onto the stage the co-leaders and original dreamers of AMPed, Dr. Anna West and Destiny Cooper. And just a reminder again to turn off your cameras or you're on stage, okay? So turn off the cameras and unmute yourself. So thank you so much. Anna and Destiny, the floor is yours.
So good morning, everyone. It's so great to have you all here with us. My name is Destiny Cooper, and I am the Humanities AMPed Instructional Specialist with East Baton Rouge Parish School System.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you this morning. My name is Anna West, and I'm the Director of Humanities AMPed. We're going to start by just sharing our vision, mission, and approach with you.
Our vision is to build an innovative and dynamic community of lifelong learners and civic leaders.
Our mission is to advance transformative learning in public schools so that every educator and student is engaged and empowered for success.
And our approach centers student well-being, connectedness, and builds confidence in youth as community-minded problem solvers. When Anna and I first went to lunch together in 2014, we were both grappling with questions while we were in grad school about education. And we wondered what would be possible if teachers and students could experience more ownership of their education, if they could have more voice in their community, and if the community could have more voice in schools. At that time and now, we understand that public schools are the foundation for a life in democracy. And we were wondering what might be possible if students and teachers engaged in studying how local and national systems and structures of schooling push too many young people and educators out of schools. We wondered what might be possible if we asked students and educators to examine the phenomenon that Gloria Ladson-Billings calls death in the classroom.
In 2014, Gloria Ladson-Billings wrote a piece that really influenced our thinking in a lot of ways. She writes, "Both teachers and students can be vulnerable to a sort of classroom death. Death in the classroom refers to teachers who stop trying to reach each and every student, or teachers who succumb to rules and regulations that are dehumanizing and result in de-skilling. Instead of teaching, such people have become mere functionaries of a system that has no intent on preparing students, particularly urban students of color, for meaningful work and dynamic participation in a democracy. The academic death of students is made evident in the disengagement, academic failure, dropout, suspension, and expulsion that have become an all too familiar part of schooling in urban schools. If we hope to disrupt this cycle, our pedagogies must evolve to address the complexities of social inequalities."
And so we wondered what might be possible if we created conditions for students and teachers to collaboratively and authentically grapple with and take action to overcome death in the classroom.
So from the start, our project has been to collectively grapple with urgent questions, most of them beginning very pragmatically with how. How do we create educational possibility with and not merely for students and their families? How do we do the hard work of transforming ourselves and the structures we work within at the same time? And most urgently, how do we create the conditions for educators, young people, and communities to be truly involved in the process of envisioning and shaping what schooling could be?
So now, as we enter our 7th year, we're now part of a larger community of people who have been gathering to ask these questions with us. As we head into this next year, our AMPed Learning community is made up of 48 people, and each of these people are members of 4 families and 9 teams. These groups are going to continue to collaborate with one another over the coming school year. About half of this learning community is made up of middle and high school students, and they are our apprentice leaders who learn with and plan with their teachers. Our community also holds a total of 15 East Baton Rouge Parish School administrators and teachers from these middle and high schools: Broadmoor, Bel Air, and McKinley High, and Westdale and Park Forest middle schools. The remaining participants are our AMPed community educators who partner with our teams to design and implement AMPed classes.
So since June 9th, we have been together online, 48 members of the AMPed Learning community. We've been building our analysis and building solutions together through the Summer Institute. We've experienced immersion in AMPed approaches through workshops, readings, and dialogues. Here's just like a little sampling of some of the great workshops that we were able to participate in with different workshop leaders. Then each of the 9 small planning teams work together to create collaborative plans for the upcoming school year. 4 of those teams are going to present an overview of their plans to you today.
And throughout the Institute, we continuously revisited these grounding questions. What are the conditions of student and educator well-being, connectedness, and engagement as civic-minded problem solvers? And how do we center these priorities in our classrooms, including in spaces of online or hybrid learning? While we don't know exactly what next year is going to look like, we got a lot of practice with online spaces and teaching in online platforms. So the plans you hear today are intended to be adaptable so that we can implement plans in whatever scenario we might find ourselves in next year.
So at Humanities AMPed, we really understand that students and educators are the experts of their own experiences. And therefore, our strategy is always to give them the support that they need to be collaborative with one another and to unlock solutions together. Of course, we don't do that work alone. And so we're really thankful for the partners and organizations that make it possible. East Baton Rouge Parish School System has made a home for us from the very beginning. And I think we can't dismiss that or overlook that. That's huge. You know, our work is about public schools, and we are really doing this work with our public school system. We are also supported by funds from Recast Baton Rouge, the Wilson Foundation, East Baton Rouge Parish School System's 21st Century Community Learning Centers, and through the generous partnership of the Big Buddy program with the Mayor's Office of Summer Youth Employment. So we're really thankful for all of those partners that help make it happen. Because of our shared work, we're proud to say that AMPed approaches have proven results. Graduation data from 4 years show that AMP students are 29% more likely than their peers to graduate from high school. Together, we're creating a concrete model of just humanized education in the heart of our public school system with students, educators, and community collaborators at the center.
Pretty exciting. So at the end of today's forum, we're going to open the floor for call and response from the audience. As you listen to the presentations, take notes on these questions and think about what you want to respond to. What has stood out to you today? What do these classrooms make possible for our community? And how can we join with these educators and students to amplify this work? We'll let you know when it's time for the audience call and response, but we encourage you to take notes as you listen.
Finally, we're so happy to have with us today Dr. David Stovall, Professor of African American Studies and Criminology, Law and Justice at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Dr. Stovall's scholarship investigates the intersections of race, place, and school. He works with community organizations and schools to address issues of equity, justice, and abolishing the school-prison nexus. He was a member of the design team for the Greater Lawndale Little Village School for Social Justice in Chicago. He's a contributor to the People's Education Movement. He's been an advisor and friend of Humanities AMP since we first began our work in 2014. And when he's not professoring and speaking and organizing, he's out there researching and writing. You can see some of his books right here or some of the anthologies that he's included in. Look him up, get his books, put your hands up now, please, and welcome Dr. David Stovall.
Well, again, thanks so much, everybody. I truly appreciate being here. And to Anna and Coop, thanks so much for having me in this space. It's really good to see y'all. And I say that because we're in a space where we're not seeing as much of each other. And I think it's really important to acknowledge what it means to be in the presence of each other. And to the young folks and families and educators who are participating today, I just want to say again, thank you. And I am extremely humbled to be here and to participate with you all, because I know you didn't have to bring someone like myself. I just wanted to say a few words about what I understand you all's work to be and how it's connected in a lot of different ways. And we are currently in a moment of unrest, right? And this moment of unrest, you all know well, given the results of what happened to Brother Alton Sterling a couple of years back. And now we see it nationally with the publicized deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and now really putting this into context. And now the question becomes, what does this mean for the schoolhouse? What does it mean in the spaces that we're supposed to be learning? And how do we now actually engage in a space that is intentional about shifting how we understand the work? And let me say something to y'all. And again, I appreciate Anna and Destiny for inviting me, because I'm usually used to getting kicked out of sessions for engaging in this way. And I think it's important. And I think you all's work states it very clearly. Reform is not enough. It is insufficient, and it is not going to get folks what they have stated that they needed. We need something different. I do not want to reform something that has never worked. So now, if we're going to be clear about creating something that works, I see you all's work as the starting point for this. Again, not something new, not something that's taking on some things that were done in the schoolhouse that didn't work, but saying, no, here's what we can do new. Here's what we can do differently. And here's how we can actually learn from the lessons of history in developing what it is that we need. So I see every presentation that will be presented today as justice work, right? And that justice work runs deep in terms of what you all have been doing in Baton Rouge. And I appreciate what happened last week in a school board meeting when folks were finally called out on their racism, right? I mean, you know, you got a school called Robert E. Lee, then you shifted to Lee, and now folks said that's not enough. We need an entirely different name. We need an entirely different understanding. And because we do, here's what we're willing to do to make sure that it happens. So I see you all's work as demonstrative of that. When you all are asking these very deep, engaged, and critical questions, those are the questions that as adults we can't run from. We have to go into them. You are making a demand that we address those issues. If we do not, then we have guaranteed ourselves more of the same. And that's why I'm really happy to see you all's work advancing in this particular way, because it's a demand that the things that they have put forward to you all have not worked. And you all are making sure that programs like Humanities AMP and you all's programs at your particular schools are one that's pushing the envelope. And I would say, as a person who's outside of you all's work, but connected to you all through struggle, to never fear the opposition, right? They're going to be there. Expect them to be there. But now you have made a decision to be on the right side of history. And being on the right side of history says that you demand this, and you demand justice in the face, in some cases, of extreme hate. So I'm really, again, proud to see what you all are doing. But at the same time, I also want us to continue to push and understand what our work is connected to, right? And when we ask those deeper questions, we are able to move our work in a very different way. And I always see that as connected to young people. So a lot of times as adults, we give you this false notion of young people are the future. Young people are right now, because there's stuff happening to you right now. The projects that you have engaged in is reflective of you saying that because things are happening to you right now, you're willing to do something about it. And I think that is the most important, because when we look at struggles across the planet, the two groups of people who are always involved, who are very rarely given credit for these struggles, are young people and women. I understand your work today as connected to that broader struggle. It is connected to me in terms of the work that folks are doing here in Chicago. It's connected to folks in New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, Houston, Charleston, New Orleans. Wherever we are, I think it becomes critically important to make those connections. And I see myself as someone who is connected to you all's work, because you have said we've had enough. And because we've had enough, here's what we're willing to do, right? We live in a world that is imbued, deeply ensconced in white supremacy. In our fight against it, the work that you all have laid forward today, I think, is very important. And when we don't engage that, again, my concern is that we have committed to more of the same. And school systems are reflective of the broader society. And the broader society has said that more of the same is what we're going to get. You all have refused that and saying we have to do something different. And we have to be willing to say that reform is not enough. We need wholesale change. We need a wholesale way of doing things differently. And when those things have been done differently, then we will see those results that become important to us because they're connected to us and they were generated by us. And because they were generated by us, there's the greater chance that they will do right by us. And I think this is where I see you all's work. So I'm indeed, again, overjoyed to be here. And thank you all so much for having me. I look forward to hearing everybody today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stovall. What a beautiful way to frame it. So now we're gonna kick it off with our first presentation, which we can show love in the comments. We can give them silent applause. So we welcome to the stage now, Westdale. Please unmic and unmute yourselves, and anybody else that has their camera on, please turn y'all's off so that we can see Westdale. And whenever y'all are ready.
Thank you so much for letting us present today. I'm really excited to be able to represent Westdale. So hashtag Westdale Heals. Our group members are Ms. Harrison, Mr. Marcel, Chad, Estrella, Nkosi, I can't see it. Okay, yeah. Nkosi, Imani, and Sydney Williams.
Our context. We are collaborating on plans for an amped elective class at Westdale Middle School for students of all grade levels. We hope to be available to work with this group for multiple years, and this is our pictures of us.
Our goals and desires. We are committed to creating a healing-centered approach to teaching and learning at Westdale. We want a healing-centered class environment where students experience well-being and connectedness.
Why healing at Westdale? Students at Westdale come from neighborhoods that experience violence weekly. They have lost loved ones, they are frightened, and they are stressed. We needed to do more at Westdale that could give each student something to help them cope, heal, and hopefully thrive academically.
Our experiences. Mr. Marcel's story. My worst educational experiences dealt with teachers who tried to silence students when they tried to challenge what they were being taught with critical thought. The best outcomes were when critical thought was encouraged. Mr. Nicosi's story. Education used to be frustrating because we were being taught to compete and not collaborate. This bruised student-student relationships and needs to be changed. Sydney's story. I'm committed to helping Westdale change because I know firsthand what it feels like for it to seem like no one wants to hear your opinion, and I want other kids to know that they are being heard. Chad's story. I want to help people who have lost people in their lives.
Our study. Meaning. In his book, Hope and Healing in Urban Education, Shawn Ginwright offers a framework for radical healing that includes 5 elements. He writes, meaning builds an awareness of the intersections of personal and political life by pushing you to understand how personal struggles have profound political explanations. And that was found on page 26. Meaning is discovering our purpose and building an awareness of our role in advancing justice. In our class, we want to have conversations about what gives life meaning and create discussions that foster self-discovery. We want the kids to know that what they do has meaning to it and that they themselves are meaningful.
Our study. Culture. Ginwright 2016 also names culture as part of the framework for radical healing. He states, culture serves as an anchor to connect young people to a racial and ethnic identity that is both historical grounded and contemporarily relevant, found on page 26. Asset-based norms of interaction that reflect the way we live, think, feel, create, and express ourselves. We aim to create a culture that is transformative in the classroom as well as the community at large.
Relationships. Ginwright also names relationships as part of the framework for radical healing. He writes, relationships are the capacity to create, sustain, and grow healthy connections with others, also found on page 26. Relationships are the way 2 or more people connect with each other. Relationships are the perfect opportunities to care and show compassion between 2 or more individuals. We aim to have positive and healthy relationships as a cornerstone in our community.
How will we accomplish this?
Student-led research. We plan to initiate student-led research where our class shall carry out research to get insights to help us determine how our work can best serve the interests of the entire student body. Doing so will help us include voices of the larger Westdale community as we attempt to change the school culture together.
Student-led workshops. We shall attempt to roll out our work across the entire Westdale community. To fulfill this, we will have our students lead workshops in different classes to teach our practices to the rest of the school. These workshops shall be informed by insights we obtain through our research team.
Our plans. Topics. Healing ourselves, healing student to student relationships, healing student to teacher relationships, healing student to administrative relationships, and healing student to community relationships. We will use restorative circles, mind-body wellness, the arts, and research to explore these topics.
Plans continued. Students and teachers at Westdale will be surveyed to determine the needs for healing at our school. Every 2 to 3 weeks, students will move through a unit based on our topics, healing ourselves, etc. Creative Studios will give students a way to express what they've learned about each topic through poetry, art, dance, etc. We hope to host school-wide open mics to share our creations, promote healing, and invite others to do the same. The artwork the students complete in the Creative Studio will assess their understanding of the topic. Students will be able to use everything learned in this class to create their own workshops. These workshops will be presented to classes at our school in the second semester. We will also do teacher training based on what we learn. At the end of the year, we will have a showcase showing all of our artwork.
Questions or recommendations for policymakers. 1. How can our school system better include student voices in the decisions and policy making? How do we make sure that Westdale students access the same resources for healing that people with more resources can access? We recommend shifting resources to counselors who can support our student mental health and wellness. We recommend providing more resources for students, families, and educators to learn more about mental health and how to have healing-centered classrooms. And we also recommend that EBRPSS provide professional development opportunities for all teachers and administrators to study and implement community-based solutions.
Closing thoughts. We support our school community in starting off small and growing with intentions. As we work with EBRPSS, our principal, and our community, let's attempt to heal each other and make Westdale a better place. We hope that you can support our intent for change. We look forward to everyone seeing us grow as the year progresses. Hashtag Westdale Strong.
Thank you so much, everyone. Please give them more praise in the chat and give them some silent applause. Now we will hear a little bit of what Dr. Stovall thought about this presentation.
Man, Westdale, look, rise up. Man, thank y'all so much for actually putting that forward. And I think it's important to say that so many people do not believe in the capacity of you all as middle schoolers to enact change on your reality, right? You are proving them wrong. This is what I get in trouble about at my job, saying that if you put it to young folks are going to respond in the ways that they see fit, and they will demand what is needed. So thank y'all again so much for that. I think there are a couple of things that I think that really are important as you all move this work forward. Making sure that you have the humanities class as an elective for all students, like making sure that all students have access. And then another part that I think is important, and you all pointed it out, is this idea of collaboration over competition. We all give you the false story that competition is the way to go, but there's a problem in competition. Competition has a winner and a loser. And the issue is, in many of our schools, we've already determined who's going to lose. Collaboration says we all win, or in Chicago, as young folks say, we all eat. So this thing around, so that to me was really important. The second thing that's good, and I think this will be important as you move your work forward, in terms of making sure that you have those surveys actually really keep staying on the school about what have been the responses in the surveys, because that's the space that you build from. That's the space where you can figure out what's actually needed, and it won't just come down from district, but just saying the needs here are different, and here are our specific needs. And now, as you all mentioned, the professional developments will now, for the teachers, will now be reflective of the expressed needs. I think that is critical. And I love the fact that you all stated that you all are starting small and are growing with intentions. This is the key to any organizing work. And I think as you all, as young folks who are moving on this and seeing this right on, I think it's critical. But this is, again, I think the challenge will be to make sure that you all are consistent, and don't worry about if things don't necessarily go your way right off. Stay consistent, hold the line, make sure you continue to push and be clear about what it is that you're doing. This is excellent work, y'all. I am truly happy. You all are putting a lot of stuff in the ether that we need to be dealing with. And this is an important, you all have been very astute and determined in your study. I won't say rigorous because rigor means stiffness and death, but you all have been very intentional about your work. So thank you all again for that. I truly appreciate where you all are going with this work. And I think the challenge will be to make sure you're able to stay consistent if there have been some barriers that are thrown in your way. Thank you all so much for allowing me to be a part of that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stovall. So our second team is from Park Forest Middle and Bel Air. Give them some silent applause and shout outs in the comments. So Park Forest Bel Air, you can unmute and put your cameras on and y'all can start whenever y'all are ready.
Good morning, everyone. This is our presentation. It's called Amped Rising, From Raiders on the Rise to Bel Air Bengals, Civic-Minded Problem Solvers. Part of our team includes Ms. Tana Boudreaux-Allen, Administrative Dean at Park Forest Middle, Creative Science and Arts Magnet. Me, Winston Gentle, an ESS teacher at PFM CSAM. Tasha McCarver, ELA teacher at PFM. And Ryan Murray, STEM coordinator at Bel Air Creative Science and Arts Magnet High. Our context: we are collaborating on plans for middle and high schools. We're using civic-minded problem solving to develop students who are engaged in their communities. Using Humanities AMP practices, we hope to establish stronger relationships between students, parents, teachers, and the community. We plan to hold culminating story circles between Park Forest and Bel Air, which are feeder schools, to build and strengthen relationships within this community. I will collaborate on plans in a co-teaching environment for an ELA 7 inclusion setting. Tasha will implement Humanities AMP approaches in a traditional ELA 7 setting. Tana will incorporate Humanities AMP practices during a monthly club entitled Raiders on the Rise. And Ryan will implement Humanities AMP approaches in a musical elective that serves grades 9 through 12. Our goals and desires are to establish conditions of connectedness, well-being, and civic-minded problem solving among the school, students, teachers, and parents. To work towards self-expression through student experiences, and to teach students how to advocate for themselves and to understand specific content areas as tools for changing their own circumstances as well as the circumstances of the community. Our experiences: you can see me in high school. Through my years in school, although I was engaged in some content areas, self-expression and engagement in activities such as book club, creative writing, and art class helped me to engage in school more fully.
Good morning. Myself as a 5- and 6-year-old. Jack and Jill went up the hill. May I have a glass of water? Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair. But her hair did not look like mine. Little Bo Peep, I felt like one of your lost sheep. In elementary during the 70s, I didn't see or hear. I didn't see or learn from anyone who looked like me. I was a shy, insecure girl who didn't know my identity. Today, my hands fiddle with a sense of urgency to equip the youth with knowledge of their rich heritage. These connections will enable students who look like me to know that their lives matter.
In school, I bounced between so-called learning disabled classes and so-called gifted classes, sometimes racking up D's and F's, and other times I made straight A's. As an adult, I realized that my academic performance had almost nothing to do with my innate abilities and everything to do with emotional and material circumstances, both in and out of school.
My time spent in the Humanities AMP Institute has helped me find my brave space. It has made me brave enough to form real connectedness and well-being within my classroom, which I have always been so scared to do because of the totality of power I was told to have within the classroom. I want to create that same brave space for my students. Our first goal is to establish conditions of connectedness, well-being, and civic-minded problem solving among all parents, students, teachers, and communities. Our study, the ideal of school as a form of community life is one in which students do not merely prepare for a future world in which they will do English or any other subject matter, but one in which students do subject matter as a form of community life in the here and the now. Dr. West's dissertation. Implementation. Brain space poems shared and read aloud at the beginning of every monthly club. Revamp the parent conference room to reflect a get right center that promotes well-being with all parties, parents, students, as well as teachers. Implement conflict resolution practices within the school's parent-teacher conferences to implement restorative justice practices within monthly PTA meetings, partnering with Metromorphosis, a community nonprofit organization that focuses on connecting schools, communities, and families under the direction of Dexter Jackson, who is the innovationist and catalyst for the organization.
Our next goal is to work towards self-expression through student experiences. Our study says that we must struggle together, not only to reimagine schools, but to build new schools that we are taught to believe are impossible. Schools based on intersectional justice, anti-racism, love, healing, and joy, and the possibilities of committing ourselves to an abolitionist pursuit of freedom. Freedom, not reform. Our implementation for this self-expression is to establish student experiences with a writing workshop in which students write what ideals they would like to see in their community. To implement story circles in which students can share their experiences in their community and relate it to why they chose a particular ideal in their society. And to use an open reading and writing studio process in which students can choose their own literacy assignments, using self-expression to write about their own lives, activities, and passions.
Ryan, you're on mute.
I was doing a really good job though, except for I was on mute. Another goal that we have is to teach students how to advocate for themselves and to understand the content that we're teaching them as tools for changing their own circumstances and the circumstances in their community. Our study, collective hope also contributes to well-being. That is, when residents, young people, or community groups act to improve the quality of life for the group as a whole, the process of movement towards the shared goal engenders existential outcomes such as purpose, imagination, meaning, and faith. Now, to implement this, this is going to be a big lift, but I'm going to recommend a PBL on implementing restorative justice at Bel Air, so sort of changing our discipline paradigm. Project-based learning is a teaching method where students develop knowledge and skills over an extended period of time by investigating and responding to real serious issues and questions that directly affect them. And so this is kind of a twofer. Doing it as a PBL is a learning experience for the kids, but also coming up with real things that we can recommend to our school administration to change how discipline works at Bel Air. Other goals are we want to do a poetry workshop that concludes with an open mic so that students can share their work, creating student-led podcasts about community-oriented topics, and implementing sort of some of our circle techniques and our creative critiques that we do of each other's work in my class.
We have a powerful potential in our youth And we must have the courage to change old ideas and practices so that we may direct their power toward good ends. Mary McLeod Bethune, African American educator and civil rights activist. Questions for our policymakers. What practices and disciplinary actions could be revised to be more effective school-wide? Can we implement conflict resolution strategies in the classrooms and by grade level? Could we reform the way parent conferences are conducted to give students and parents equity of power and voice? We have some recommendations for our policymakers. So we would like to have a conversation with the administrative teams at our schools about reforming school-wide discipline to implement restorative justice practices to offer healing to our community. We would like to see professional development run by Humanities AMP to aid in making school-wide policies for change in how the school handles discipline. In addition, we recommend that schools involve student councils more closely in these school reform initiatives.
Closing thoughts. Our shared radical imagination helps us to visualize the school resolving the disconnection among the school, home, school, and the community. The educational experience could be enhanced by incorporating healing and reconciliation rather than crime and punishment. Together, we can give our students a new hope that is rooted in the support that they will receive in their community. We hope to see parents and other community members feel like their opinion and voice matter. We call to action that a Humanities AMP member is on the board for the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board Rights and Responsibility Handbook Committee, so that the rules and policies that govern the schools within our district reflect values that create conditions or connectedness, well-being, and civic-minded problem solving. Hope, understood as a collective phenomenon, is not simply the aggregate of individual hopefulness. Rather, collective hope is a shared vision of what could be, with a shared commitment and determination to make it a reality. We're going to close out with a poem, and the poem is entitled Letter to My Younger Self from Brandon, Amplifying Healing Justice.
Try to keep your favorite memories. Don't just try and forget. When your friend hits the ground, push the room, call for help, do something other than cry. When your friend hits the ground, know he will not be the last. Next time someone asks if you would like to visit your grandmother, tell them please. When you lose her, don't try and sleep it off. Remember, cry for her before it's too late, before you start forgetting what parts of you she liked. When your dad dies a year later, you will blame yourself. You will hate these hands he gave you, this heart he gave you. You will try and rip it out. Stop this pain that it gave you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful job, Port Forest and Bel Air. We will now turn and hear a little bit of a response from Dave Stovall.
Again, thanks so much, everybody. So Park Forest and Bel Air, thanks so much for actually engaging us in some things that I think a lot of times school districts are adverse in hearing. And I think the challenge moving forward will be for school districts to understand what does it mean to talk about intersectionality, abolitionist practice, anti-racist practice, justice-centered practice, and then this idea of unlearning to learn, right? So we have to shake off all of the order and compliance that's been placed on us that has very little to do with learning to now engage in a practice of learning. And I think you all have engaged in what it means to actually do this in your respective spaces, but also to keep the focus on the young people and this shift. And I think this is an important shift when you all talk about school as community life, right? And school as connected to community life, and the content areas as connected to the lives of your students, right? This is a practice that I think is the most challenging to do, because you have all of the order and compliance from the district, and now you have to figure out what are the ways to make sure that whatever your content area is, that you can make it relevant to the lives of young people. And one of the things around doing that is centering it in their issues and concerns. And it's a tough question to ask of young people as teachers, because one of the things that they're originally going to say is, look, this isn't making sense to our lives. It has no connection. So we as educators can't take that personally, but have to understand that as a very forthright pedagogical question. This idea of what are we willing to do to actually shape content to connect to the lives of our students. And I think the ways that you've named the various practices, I think are important, but I think this is the issue that administrators will perpetually fight you on. But we always have, a good friend of mine here in Chicago always says, we have to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is we are currently compiled or coerced in many ways to engage young folks in things that are not relevant. And because we're coerced to do that, we get more of the same. And I think you all's work in naming that space. I love the name of the Get Right Center. If I can, I'm stealing that one, y'all. That's fresh. But this idea of being able to center your work in connectedness and well-being. And now, if we're centered in connectedness and well-being, then what does our content look like? How are we engaging young folks? And you all name spaces like the poetry workshop, the theater class. But now this thing around instilling this, I think the challenge will be now to instill this, as you all have named, especially when we talk about discipline, right? Because discipline in school space is often just punishment for a supposed infraction. And when you shift that, it's really around saying, if we are trying to heal, what are the issues and concerns that have led to this moment? And now how do we address not only the moment, but the issues and concerns that have led us there, right? And I think this is now a different type of work. And you all have named in your presentation that different type of work. And I would just pose this challenge. You all no longer have to talk about reform, right? This is literally shifting the paradigm. You are naming the idea that what you all have experienced has not worked. And now, in order for you, so since you all have seen these glimpses of hope where things do work, you have now named what it would take to make sure that that is consistent in that place. So again, not necessarily reforms, but something new. And I think, again, you all were very clear in your explanation, and I appreciate that. And I think the things that you all have named are the challenges that you will face, but you also have to, again, like the first group, you have to remain consistent. That is the key in any type of change work. You must remain consistent despite the challenges. And I think you all are well on your way in terms of naming those practices. And so now it's about that work of doing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stovall. Now we're going to take a moment to feature one of our former students. Tariel George has been an AMP student, apprentice leader, and now is transitioning to be a community educator. As an AMP student, she took different AMP electives and English classes, particularly Educators Rising, an elective that prepares students to become teachers. In this class, Tariel has led workshops for her high school peers, has gone to elementary schools, and even to a conference. Because of her AMP experiences, Ms. George wants to become a teacher. Today, Tariel is going to read a poem she wrote to policymakers during our institute. Tariel, whenever you're ready.
Okay, hello everyone. All right, so I'm about to begin reading my poem. Okay. We learn at an early age that some things are different and some things we just have to accept. But can you accept change? Can you accept that children of color are becoming doctors and lawyers, nurses and business owners, scientists and teachers, entrepreneurs at ages 16 or younger, accountants and architects? If you made it a law for us to be in school to learn, keyword learn, why are we limited in school? Why does the color of my skin have to be a red flag throughout my career? How come we only see people of color in textbooks hopeless but not praised? Why is our classroom small? Is it because you don't want us to grow? Why are our schools set up like prison? Big gates that surround schools to not keep others out but to keep our dreams in? Deans at every corner as police are at every prison cell? Our bodies are on their time like prisoners are on the system time. It's a shame y'all punishment, discipline procedure restricts a student's ability to grow. Don't you think 3 days away from school due to a hoodie being worn are 3 days of missed opportunities? I don't know about you, but every day away from school is a day added to the streets. Or is that just what you want? Let's not stay stuck like a footprint in concrete. It's not hard to see that we won't change. What can we do to let it be known that we won't change? We are not going to give up on change. We are the fight to change because we are the change. Thank you.
Wonderful, Tariel. Keep giving her love in the comment section. What an example of what happens when you give students the right resources and amplify their voices. Now, we are going to go to our third presentation. Our third presentation is from Bel Air High, so give them some love in the chat. Bel Air, please unmute, turn on your cameras, and start whenever y'all are ready.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having us. Today, we are introducing our class goals, focus, and structure for the upcoming school year in our presentation, Built to Fail, Architectural Design in Inequity, Present and Past, where we're going to explore how architecture can be used to both segregate or create opportunity for our community.
Our class is Civil Engineering and Architecture. A Humanities AMP and Project Lead the Way elective integration at Bel Air Manning Creative Arts and Sciences High School. Our school promotes a project-based learning environment for learners from diverse backgrounds. Our team's goals are to develop inquisitive, critical, analytical, lifelong learners and civic-minded problem solvers. Youth apprentice leaders will help design and facilitate the course goals, lesson and activities, and student working groups will rotate with each project. Our goals and desires. What do we want to achieve this year? Our overarching goals are to build community relationships with each other, introduce a safe space where creativity is supported, and develop youth leaders with a toolkit of transferable professional skills that prepare them to build the world they want to see through civic action. Our goals are achieved by developing new aligned standards that create opportunities for deep dives and discussion around how shared learning and knowledge can influence how our societies are built and our connections maintained.
Our team is comprised of Ms. B. Araneta, an engineer and AMP lab teacher at Bel Air Magnet High School, and myself and Talasia Holiday, seniors attending Bel Air Magnet High School, who are also apprentice leaders. Our team comes from a diverse background racially, ethnically, and economically. We are proud women of color who profoundly understand the historical disenfranchisement of our voices in societies and are also expected to uphold roles that not always subscribe to.
Given the overwhelming body of evidence that reveals decades of funding and structural inequalities between schools in high and low income communities, it is illogical to compare schools across these communities and then decry urban schools as failures. To a large degree, the public discourse recognizes but leaves unchallenged the fact that wealthier communities have better educational opportunities. At some point, we must come to grips with the fact that we are not a nation of opportunity for all, but a nation built upon grand narratives of opportunity for all.
We must struggle together not only to reimagine schools, but to build new schools that are taught to or believed are impossible. We do not forget injustices. We will focus instead on love, well-being, joy, and refuse to be oppressed any longer. We chose these quotes because we come from failing urban school, and we know that that this is a false narrative. Instead of focus on the negative, we choose to uplift, heal our community by showing love, compassion, and respect.
Building community infrastructure. As designers, we know that building an equitable community infrastructure is achieved by empowering community members to be involved in the social and economic uplifting of their own communities. As youth leaders, our goal is to build a classroom community infrastructure that develops respectful relationships with each other and in an inclusive environment where students help direct their own learning experiences in ways that are meaningful to them. Our practices will help establish classroom norms of respect, safety, and openness so that everyone feels welcome and has an important role to fulfill. Two of our practices include check-ins and maintaining class roles. Check-ins will be done every day at the beginning of class and help build our class relationships by creating a safe space for students to express gratitude, needs, and wants without judgment. Class roles help manage class norms and are a great way to establish routines that make students feel a sense of responsibility and seriousness. This will help them stay focused for the year. Listen, reflect, and revise. Two more class practices we will use to build our community infrastructure are story circles and teacher-student reflections. Story circles are a practice that gives people the opportunity to connect socially by sharing their personal stories and experiences and grounding the classroom and community. Reflections help reinforce equality and accountability and ensure student voices are valued by incorporating their feedback to improve and refine our class infrastructure and processes by consensus.
An example of a story circle question is tell a story about the time you stepped out of your comfort zone and how A, it made you see yourself differently, and B, how others see you. An example of a check-in question is what are some things you value the most about your class, your team, yourself? And some of our class roles will include facilitator, timekeeper, and note taker.
Connecting our goals to our plans. Our goal is to include research, readings, and discussions of historical and current social and environmental justice issues to guide equitable and just project designs. The amped practice of reading the word through a critical lens will help illustrate perspectives of disenfranchised stakeholders and guide students in becoming civic-minded problem solvers. Incorporating local community mentors and volunteering in our projects helps students build a comprehensive understanding of the stakeholder conditions they need to address through their project designs. Professional mentors will be invited to facilitate rotating seminar groups with differentiated content where students can broaden their scope of knowledge and see leadership in practice. Through debate and discussion of our research and critical lens readings, students learn to justify the reasoning behind their design decisions, providing students with real-world job training. Often students leave school without a clear connection to the utility of their knowledge and its application in a real-world career setting. In each of the civil engineering and architecture units, students will learn and apply professional skills, including soft skills with project-based learning activities that create opportunities for students to reflect on the outcomes of their work and impact of their designed products. Professional mentors and community partnerships help students refine their ideas, tactics, and product designs while introducing them to practical working strategies for problem solving.
Students will research the history of architecture and engineering within different countries, societies, and cultures, examining the influence of cultural, societal, and environmental factors that urban design and housing around the world, and comparing urban policies and legislation that has been used, even today, to displace people of color and increase segregation will be used to challenge existing narratives of equal opportunity. Students tour neighborhoods with varying socioeconomic and racial demographics, collecting testimonials to include in their team presentation on how real people live their lives and manage struggles. Students will work with mentors and professionals to learn engineering and financial literacy and develop a toolkit of transferable skills, including how to navigate college and home loans, create credit, invest in the stock market, simulation games, and competitions are used to practice skills and compare outcomes.
One large project will be for students to design their own home. To guide student research prior to design, the class will take field trips to explore different residential structures and assess the impact these built environments have on community members who live there. Students develop professional skills by researching loans, budgeting a bill of materials, and managing time. To ensure environmentally sustainable design, students will identify the appropriate materials for their geographical location and model efficiency with 3D CAD software. After completing their designs and prototypes, teams will present their designs during a class gallery walk and school-wide parent and community showcase night. Our goal is to provide students with tools, strategies, and opportunities to take civic action to change undesirable policies or practices at school and in the community. Our school-centered projects and products will address the built environment and its impact on student learning, emotional wellness, behavior, and a sense of pride in the school and themselves.
Commercial building design and school improvements. Our culminating project will be a school improvement plan. Our school magnet theme is renewable energy and sustainability. In partnership with Ms. Payne, the Arts Pathway Lead engineering students will redesign the student courtyards, including student and staff input through surveys and collaborative design. Sure, prior to making important design decisions. Students will research building code constraints and requirements, conduct weekly facility assessments and audits, and use modeling software to model and improve structural integrity and efficiency.
This project will incorporate student feedback and achievements from the 2019-2020 school year, such as the Plastics and Waste Recycling Program for Green Ribbon School Status, and build upon future feedback from peers. Current courtyard designs include remodeling and refurnishing the outdoor space with more and shaded seating, a performance stage, community gardens to highlight and address local food security, solar charging stations, gray water reuse, and a biogas barbecue.
Recommendations for policymakers. We as students do not feel as though we have input or influence in our own education, how or what we learn. Instead, it is often adults in a top-down approach to learning that we experience. We are here to say, we do, not you do. Our class will serve as a model to witness collaborative planning and consensus-based decision-making without personal bias, using strategies like decision matrices and community surveys where stakeholders' feedback is then used in an iterative design process until all parties are confident in design and policies are working in their best interests. Closing thoughts. I want policymakers to be attentive to our goals and reasonings. We will feel validated and will have an expansion of privilege. Educational experience for teachers and students will be more enjoyable because our voices will be heard, respected, and acknowledged.
My vision for the educational landscape is a place that better equips us for the real world, making us confident to ask questions and confident and comfortable to be ourselves. I want to see a system where speaking out for what we believe in is applauded and being able to express ourselves is not shamed.
Amazing. I want to audit that class. Everyone, give them some more love in the comments. And now we will hear a response from Dr. Stovall.
Man, to the young folks and teachers at Bel Air, let me first say that all I first had to say in my response was a bunch of curse words, but they were all good. But in terms of the depth that you all have engaged this idea of architecture and inequality, I think this is where our work really needs to go. And you all have engaged in what's referred to by urban planners as community-based design. And community-based design is centered around the needs and issues and concerns of the community. And I really appreciate those projects of demonstration. This becomes important because a lot of times in project-based learning, we can just complete the project, but the idea of really going into what have we learned in the process of doing this really becomes important. I also think that this idea. I work with a chemist by the name of Danny Morales Doyle, who teaches, who actually is a professor, who also is a chemist, who teaches science education. And he talks about the idea of science has often been who is allowed to become a scientist. And that's been rooted in white supremacy, sexism, ageism, homophobia, and the like. He often says, what does it mean to shift our understandings of science to ones that state, how can I use what I know to change the conditions of myself and the people that I care about? I think you all have actually engaged in a project that allows you to do this, right? And again, the challenges will come forward because in terms of folks trying to get a grasp on what it is that you're telling them, but I think it's really important in your work to hold the course. This, what you all have demonstrated in ways of understanding the built environment, allows us to now rethink any building that we either live in or come in contact with. What are the streets connected to? Who are the people who designed the streets? For what purpose was the design created? Because again, you all can get into redlining, restrictive covenants. I mean, all of these particular processes that now allow us to rethink how our world is engineered, right? I mean, this is excellent work. And I really am happy that you all have stated in your presentation, really getting into the utility of learning, right? So this idea of learning for the purpose for being in the world, right? And shifting and changing that world. I think it's critically important that we see these projects of demonstration, not just to be done or completed, but actually making that connection to the utility of learning. I think that's a huge idea that a lot of people are giving lip service to, but very few people are doing. And I also really appreciate the idea that you all have a project of demonstration right there in the schoolhouse, right? Biogas, sustainable gardening, actually creating shade for comfort and well-being in the courtyard. This is super solid work. Again, I think this is how we begin to rethink our understanding of our world and then engaging in some real practices by which to shift it. And the built environment is a perfect space to start. I really appreciate this work. And like Alex said, I wish I could take the class myself. I need to get myself together to be able to get on you all's level. But again, thank you all for literally allowing us to see what those projects of demonstration can look like. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Stovall. I mean, you're always welcome in Baton Rouge. So we would be more than happy to have you down to visit all of our schools whenever you get a chance and whenever it's safe to. So our final team is from Broadmoor High. So give them some love and praise in the comments. Broadmoor, please unmute, put your cameras on, and go ahead and start whenever y'all are ready.
Our presentation is now all right. So this is learning to unlearn a radically imaginative approach to schools, presented by Tremaine Sanders, Anna Silas, Kobe Turkwood, and Donnie Rhodes. We begin with a quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes. Man's mind stretched to a new idea never goes back to its original dimension. So the context of the plan that we are, or the class that we're planning for, a couple of things to take into consideration. Ms. Sanders, who's the classroom teacher, does not yet know what class she will teach, but the plans that we've created are broad enough to be applied to any class. The students who will be in the class, traditionally Ms. Sanders has taught juniors, primarily African Americans and Latinx students. What you all need to know about our students and how they're grouped Grouping was random in previous school years, but ideally, the students will decide if they want to be in this course. Who are the people on the team? I mentioned the names before, but here are the lovely pictures. We have to the far left, Ms. Tremaine Sanders, the classroom teacher. Next is myself, Donnie Rose. Then we have Anna Silas, who is a Humanities AMP apprentice leader. And then we have Kobe Turkwood, who is also a Humanities AMP apprentice leader. Ms. Sanders.
So we thought it very important to begin with the quote about radical imagination, because you will hear that woven throughout our presentation, as it is the cornerstone or the crux of this work that we plan to do. Radical imagination is the result of a collective agreement about why injustice has occurred and a shared vision that ruptures our day-to-day life, propelling towards seeking a more just and fulfilling way of life. So the goals and desires that we have for our radically imaginative schooling is first to create a safe haven. We want to create a trusted environment so that our students feel safe and comfortable, not only in confiding with us as the leadership, but also in confiding in each other in a sense of community. We want to build capacity within our classroom so that it's an environment that our students fully exercise their agency and their advocacy in ways that they have not been allowed to up until this point. We also want to do the work of developing their individual identities and how those identities play into the larger, more more community identity. So we're going to use the class so that they get a deeper understanding of who they are.
All right, our experiences. So I've been a teaching artist for 14 years, working with educators in English classrooms, primarily through the medium of spoken word poetry and creative writing. Ms. Sanders, who's a product of the EBR school system, who in her 11 years of teaching recognizes the same challenges exist now for her students that were present during her time as a student. She's deeply committed to being a part of an evolution in education that helps students fully activate their potentialities in ways that make high achievement a natural byproduct of holistic education. And then Anna Silas is a junior at Broadmoor High, and Anna has a deep understanding of the type of classroom settings that often leave students unfulfilled and longing for an education that values them and sees them. Kobe Turkwood, also a junior at Broadmoor High, wants to help her fellow students gain deeper understanding of themselves that will contribute to their continued growth well beyond high school.
Those of us who span outside the circle of this society's definition of acceptable women, those of us who have been forged in the crucibles of difference, those of us who are poor, who are lesbian, who are Black, who are older, know that survival is not an academic skill. It is learning how to take our differences and make them strengths. One of the things that I want to pull out of this wonderful Audre Lorde quote is the notion of the crucible of difference. This is something that is important to the work that we are doing. And when we talk to our students about identity and this notion of otherness as an affliction, we want to change that in the ways that she says to turn our differences and make them strengths. So connecting our goals to our plans with respect to that crucible of difference and otherness as an affliction, we want to create a safe haven that allows our students to understand and express their individual identities and develop an understanding of how those identities fit into and help to shape the larger Broadmoor community. One way that we're going to create this safe haven is through community agreements and norms that will be created through consensus with the idea that we want to foster a healthy environment so that not only are our student voices heard, but they are also honored. We'll create a classroom contract that's derived from those norms. And we think it's important that our statements be affirmative. where we'll focus on what we will do as opposed to what we will not do. As an example of that, in this space, we will honor each other's experiences. And here is an example of what a safe haven looks like for us. Everyone is engaged, everyone is comfortable in their skin, and this is what we want our classroom to look like each day.
All right. A relaxed release space will be created in the classroom that will give students an opportunity through guided reflection and calming methodologies like art and music to recenter themselves. Students will have a choice of utilizing this space for the remainder of the class period and the duration of the next class as a nonverbal participant. Story circles / restorative circles will be used to foster strategic communication that allows for the achievement of predetermined goals. Writing workshops will allow students to study mentor texts together and play and practice with language in a way that allows for revision, coaching, encouragement, and praise. This is an example of a writing workshop. We will build capacity by creating an environment where students are able to fully exercise their agency and advocacy. We will assign rotating classroom roles that allow students to function as classroom leaders and advocates. We will vote for a weekly class spokesperson who will deliver a state of class address at the start of each week. The address will be based on the previous week's feedback that will be submitted anonymously via note cards being placed in a class communication box. We will create a system of voting / consensus on issues as they arise in order to create a responsive classroom that promptly addresses feedback. We will model a democratic space in which students' voices are focal points to be magnified with the hope that it will be replicated at Broadmoor High on a larger, more expansive scale. Our classrooms will foster and develop individual identities in a safe haven that allows students to have deeper understanding of themselves and the ways in which they can positively impact the larger Broadmoor community. We will have weekly class dialogues that will take place based on the submission of guided dialogue questions from students at the beginning of each week. One question will be chosen as the focal point for that week's discussion. We will explore intersectionality and identity to develop a keen sense of introspection that will ultimately lead students to discover the power of their voices. We will have We Wednesdays that will my bad. We Wednesdays will be utilized as a means of asking students about their curiosities. At the start of each week, students will create consensus around one curiosity. We will then explore that curiosity through research. A reflection conversation will serve as the culmination of this activity. This is an example of a guided dialogue. We plan to have everyone in a circle where they're all facing each other, and we'll include a talking piece to let everyone know who is talking.
Perpetual urban school failure is tolerated because deep down, our nation subscribes to the belief that someone has to fail in school. In fact, this quasi-Darwinian belief system is built into most schools through the existence of a largely unchallenged pedagogical system of grading and testing that is by its very design guarantees failure for some. This is from Dr. Bettina Love's We Want to Do More Than Survive. So the questions that we have for policymakers to evoke the radical imagination that we hope for. How satisfied are you with suspension expulsion rates? How do current disciplinary practices or policies positively or negatively impact school culture? What is possible when students play a role in design and implementation of school disciplinary policies? If we allowed quarterly student-led state of the school addresses, how might this transform school culture and climate? How might restructuring the levels of power to include students improve student outcomes? And what I want to quickly say is that as we were developing these questions, we were trying to be cognizant of not necessarily putting folks on the quote unquote defense. And so the framing of these questions are, if there is something that seems deficit based, then we're going to let the policymakers tell us that, as opposed to us backing them in a corner and, forcing them to give us, whatever type of answer. So again, the framing of these questions is like, asking introspection from them. How do you? What do you? So that's the intention there.
So here's our call to action, and this is our piece where we are going to include some striking statistics. These statistics are from Broadmoor High, but I want to point out that though this is from one school, these statistics are definitely reflective of our society at large and schools all over the country, in particular schools with Black and Brown populations. So in 2018, 42.5% of the student population at Broadmoor High received an in-school suspension. It's important to note here that the out-of-school suspension rate was listed as above 10 or more than 10, but no concrete data was available from the Department of Education on the specific number of kids that received out-of-school suspensions. I think that is very curious. So our question here is, what are some necessary disciplinary policy changes that could improve the in-school and out-of-school suspension rates? In 2018 at Broadmoor High, 29 kids dropped out in the 9th grade, 34 dropped out in the 10th, 20 kids dropped out in the 11th, and 13 kids dropped out in their senior year. The call to action here is, how can we reinvent contemporary education in ways that lead to higher retention rates? This last statistic, unfortunately, the most recent data is from 2016-17, is about truancy. And I found this very disturbing. But 74% of Broadmoor High students were considered truant at least once within the school year. And so I wanted to know exactly how truancy was defined by our school district. And it said that it could be from missing one class or a day without a reason. So that's a kid cutting a whole day or even missing one class. 74% of our students have done that. So how do we encourage and incentivize consistent student attendance? How can we minimize the deterrents that lead to such high incidence of truancy? So we have some proposals to influence change. And I find it very powerful that the crux of these came from our 2 student apprentices. They said that we need to allow teachers to be more flexible in the curriculum. Gloria Latson-Billing talks a great deal about cultural relevance. I wrote my master's thesis on that very topic. We believe that teachers need to have the flexibility to have a curriculum that is representative and reflective of the students they teach. We want to reimagine how teachers are trained to respond to discipline. We believe it's important to reframe what warrants a disciplinary infraction. Are we fighting the necessary battles? Or are we nitpicking things that are of little to no value and then ultimately creating deterrence for our kids actually wanting to even be at school? And we also think that it is important that we advocate for and include student voices.
The policymakers listen and engage with radical imagination. These are the things that we could hope for. A reduction in truancy, because school would be where students really want to be. Wild concept, right? A true sense of community between students and teachers, because, yeah. Restorative justice would be the norm and not just a radical idea shared by a few. I'm going to run that back. Restorative justice would be the norm and not just a radical idea shared by a few, which is ultimately what we're trying to push folks toward. and a boost in student achievement as a natural byproduct. We believe through our presentation that policymakers, school board members, administrators all have to have the same equal level of investment in this type of reimagining of what our school classrooms can look like if it's going to prove to be effective. The vision for a radically imaginative educational landscape: student advocacy and self-governance that gives students a platform to democratically raise opportunities for problem solving at Broadmoor. True democratic environment where students are seen as true stakeholders. Everyone is an active participant in the educational process. Students feel safe to be their whole selves without fear of judgment or retribution. So we talked pretty extensively about that last idea of, creating beyond safe spaces, but like safety zones and environments where young people feel completely whole and completely and fully actualized to be their whole selves. And we believe that that is like one of the first steps to radically transforming classrooms. And some of our visions also include collaborative work, quarterly think tanks between student administrators, teachers, and school board members. So the idea here is that small numbers of students, small numbers of administrators, small numbers of teachers, small numbers of school boards come together once a quarter and basically bring critiques, bring grievances, bring best practices. And the idea is that upon them leaving the think tank, everyone then goes back to their respective communities, so to speak, and share best ideas. And so we think that there's a certain power in school board members being able to directly hear critique from students, admins being able to directly hear critique from teachers, and there being a cross-sectional dialogue. We also want to invite teachers to monthly after school planning lessons. We don't want to be selfish with our planning and with our ideas. And so what that would look like is that once a month, teachers of their own volition would come to an after school planning session and see how we are doing it in our AMP classroom. And then the last thing, and probably one of the most important things that we came up with, invite parents and community members to class workshops. What we kind of came at was that the majority of time that parents come to schools is for punitive reasons. And so we want to remix the idea of parents only showing up to schools when it's time to mitigate a problem. And so what does it look like when parents are able to occasionally come to our classrooms and be able to replicate even some of those practices at home? Because we know that students spend way more time at home than they do in the classroom. But if there's a reinforcement, then it only strengthens the school community. And likewise, with reference to community members, we want this pedagogical approach to bleed out into the community, bleed out into Baton Rouge schools well beyond just the confines of our Broadmoor classroom. And so we want to make sure that it is, linear across the board.
Thank you so much, Broadmoor. Show them some more love in the comments. So now we will hear Dr. Stovall's response.
To the folks at Broadmoor, I really want to thank you for doing a couple of things. One is actually demonstrating what praxis looks like, right? So praxis is action and reflection in the world in order to change it. And you all have been very explicit around what it means and what it would look like to do this work. I really appreciate that, because a lot of times people can just kind of talk things into the air and not really talk about what it means to actually do this work. And you all have laid forward some plans around what it would actually look like and what folks can actually do. And this is an important piece for policymakers and administrators and board members, because it's not just talk, it's literally putting forward in front of their faces, here are the things you can actually do. And I think this is important, because it's not leaving it up to them, but it's actually saying, here are the things that you can participate in that will shift the realities of this place. And thank you so much for using radical imagination, right? Because when we talk about a radical imaginary, we talk about an understanding of the way the world is, and then working to actually shift that world. So using Shawn Ginwright's work around talking about that radical imagination and how the radical imagination is used in classroom space, I think is really important. This idea of consensus and democratic space, right? For people actually participating in the work, right? So the We Wednesdays, I really like that in terms of operating off of generative themes, the generative themes now pushing us to what we would actually do in classroom space. And you all have identified some important data here, right? So this idea around truancy, right? And I think you all laid it clear. There is a misconception, right? This idea of a young person missing class for no reason. There's definitely a reason. And the main reason is usually that they don't want to be there. Now you all have actually engaged folks to say, all right, let's look at why it is that these young folks feel as if they don't want to be there. And I really appreciate that, because the answers that we will get are ones that usually adults don't like. But you all have dared to go right into it and not to stray away from it. And I think that's critical if we're talking about any type of justice-centered work, right? As collaborative work, as inclusive work. I really like the questions that you all will pose to policymakers, and then saying, okay, here's how do you understand this? What do they see can be possibly done? The idea of an inclusive question is critical, because now they don't feel like they're on Front Street always trying to backpedal. And I appreciate community understandings, getting community into the space, this understanding around parents and young folks and teachers participating in what can be done to create curriculum that's relevant and connected. And then this idea of shifting the paradigm, right? Who is the expert? And I think this becomes important, because with the young folks that I engage with, I always understand them to be experts on their lives because they are living them. You have now created a pedagogical strategy to lean into that expertise and to use that expertise to build curriculum. It's a huge addition. And I think this is, and you all have demonstrated, literally, you all have laid out the how. So no one can come back at you and say, well, no one actually told us a plan. You all have a plan. And that plan, I think, is one to be pushed on to folks to say, here's what we have the capacity to do. To what extent are they willing to do it? Right. And I think that's a really strong point of pushing your work forward. I mean, that your capacity to demonstrate this praxis, right? Action and reflection in the world in order to change it by actually doing these concrete actions to make sure that the district responds in the way that you need them to. Thank y'all for that. That's really important.
Thank you, Dr. Stovall, for your responses. Thank you so much. So these were just 4 of the teams. We had 9 total teams and all quality work. We just didn't have time to feature them all on this online space. But you can go to the website and see these presentations and the 5 we didn't get to see today. So if you want to know how Celeste, Desiree, and Trent are transforming a Bel Air outdoor space into a poetry art venue, go to the website. If you want to learn about a student-led community builders, check out Brittany, Emma's, Mariana, Ryan, Nibbles, and Sage work on the website. If you want adaptable lesson plans for the first 3 days that were co-created by middle schoolers and teachers, go check out Shakira, Kelsey's, Ian, Brian, Tariel's, and mine work on the website. If you want ideas for daily practices such as journaling, reflection, poetry workshops, co-created by high schoolers and teachers, go check out Amelia, Taylor, Deja, Tori, Angel's work on the website. And if you want to see how 4 educators at 3 different schools are committed to student well-being, check out Sheila, Shell, Shelby's, and Palumi's work on the website. So give all these folks some love in the comments. Now, as good teachers do, we want to ask a few reflection questions and ask about what you saw today. So if you feel like you want to give your answer out loud, drop your name in the chat and I'll call on you. Or you can put your comment directly in the chat and our chat manager, Emma, will help read those out loud. So our questions are, what has stood out to you today? What do these projects make possible for our community? And how can we join with these educators and students to amplify this work? Again, you can either put your name in the chat if you want to share out loud, and I'll call on you and you can unmute yourself, put your camera on, or you can drop your comment directly into the chat. So we want to hear from you. Let's see if we have any volunteers so far in the chat. Oops. Let's see. Anna, we want to hear from you. So Anna, go ahead. Anna Silas, go ahead. You can unmute yourself if you want to say something.
Okay, so for the second question, what do these classrooms make possible for our community? I think these classrooms make it possible for, you know, Black and brown students, like students of color, students of like different background, different sexuality, different like origins to, you know, really grow and become successful in the same way that white, you know, cis straight men are successful. Like it's not, you know, back in the day like in the 1950s, all you see was like, you know, white men in these powerful positions, but there are a lot of Black owned businesses, a lot of, you know, person of color, you know, led things. And I think that's like really important, especially for, you know, kids today in the schools. They see these people in these positions and say, well, I can do that too. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, your comments also, my mind went straight to Tariel's poem, again, affirming that Black and brown children can be anything and we want to see them in more positions of power and for it to be easier for them to be in those spaces. Thank you, Anna. Donnie, you can unmute yourself and you can put your camera on if you want.
I'll just keep the camera off. What stood out to me today, a lot of things, but I really want to talk about the symbolism of Sydney and Star leading off, which, you know, I don't know how much by design it was by the AMP leadership team for them to go first, but I thought that it was like a powerful metaphor that those brilliant young people were the start. And just showing like what could happen when we allow young folks in the classroom to take the lead. I sat back just kind of like, I don't even know, you know, not that it was a competition. I'm like, what do we even do after that? You know what I mean? Because they took it to such a high place. And I think that, you know, the lesson there is that we are, I think as it was mentioned earlier, like those of us who are educators and adults, sure, we may have been children of students at one point, but our students are currently living the student experience. And so, you know, when we allow spaces for them to take leadership, then ultimately we produce better classrooms. And so, like, I enjoyed everything, but I was just straight up, you know, chilled and just I received chills and just electricity by Sydney and Star's beginning.
Thank you, Donnie. Yeah, one of my favorite co-collaborators and ESL teacher at McKinley, she always says that youth succeed despite adults. So yeah, I think that it's often we as adults or older people get in the way. And I think a part of it is us making sure that their voices are amplified and that we're working with and alongside them. Rain, what about you? You can unmute yourself and put your camera on if you wish.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone has said so far. I think that what really stood out to me today was the power of our youth. And I especially liked Gabby and Talisia's quotes when we were coming up with our stuff, because they reinforce the idea that they don't feel heard. They don't feel like they have a way to participate in the direction of their own education. And that, you know, we talk about restorative justice in the classroom. We talk about trauma-informed work. And that's so important because a lot of the times that's the source. I mean, that was the source for me, right? Growing up, I was not the greatest child because of things going on. And so I could have done better in the classroom, but none of the teachers that I had really understood that. And so if we include students where maybe their voices are not heard at home and they're, you know, maybe the oppression is at the home, then they can learn to have that power. They can be re-empowered in the classroom, and then we can create these safe spaces. So I really want to find a way for all of us to get this to be a district-wide embracing of our youth, and have more youth committees that are involved in the planning process, and not just the youth, but also the teachers, because we're on the ground, we're on the front lines with our students. And those of us who are in this workshop, I mean, we all come from, we are probably cut from a similar cloth. But I think that a lot of times everyone, not just adults, also youth, you know, we don't necessarily know what to do, and so we don't do. And so giving these strategies and having these workshops broadcasted more widely, hopefully will be able to give people the tools that they need in order to create that change themselves, instead of waiting in place for someone else to tell them what to do, which is really how this top-down approach is training our youth. It's training them to wait for instruction instead of to create a plan. And that's a problem for us as a society in our future. So from a teacher perspective and from a designer perspective, including people in the process that will affect them is really the only way for it to be successful. And I think we heard a lot of that today.
Thank you, Rain. Yes, you know, collaboration is something I keep hearing. And again, this intergenerational approach. And I think that's part, I've loved these 2 weeks because we've gotten to work a lot closely as together across ages. So thank you. We have room for maybe 2 more speakers, but if while we wait, let me double check the chat to see no one's put their name. But if not, Emma, would you mind pointing out some key comments?
Yeah, definitely. So Kim said, great work, great example of 21st century community learning. Sue said that what stood out to her is the careful engagement with complex ideas, the movement from ideas to action in all of the presentations, the passion of the participants. Umi poses a question: how do we transfer all of this goodness into the virtual classroom or the socially distanced classroom? And Sue supports that question. Tony at the Baton Rouge Children's Advocacy Center says, absolutely, being part of both trauma-informed and culturally responsive is to have staff positions of leadership be represented by persons of color. Should be true of boards as well. People love what Donnie said, lots of agreement with Donnie. SK says, what has stood out to me today is that there are students and educators across the district who are actively seeking more just educational practices and asking our administrators and district leaders to rethink the systems and inequalities that get reified in education, particularly within discipline practices, a theme that we've seen come up a lot today. These classrooms make it possible that we actualize that communal hope and radical imagination and the abolitionist perspective in our classrooms and our school systems. And Ms. Evelyn Ware-Jackson said, how do we make curriculum relevant to kids' lives, restoring compassion in classrooms and in discipline practices, student voices involved in decisions around students, physical environments at the school. Dr. West said, I've learned a lot about including young people as co-educators from our friends at Breadloaf. And she shouts out Lou and Umi. Lots of positive things. Megan says that we need to share this with the school board and the new superintendent. Diana says, awesome job. Lots of just celebrations of the work today.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you, Emma. So again, we probably have, if there's other people that want to give a shout out, please do. The questions again are, what has stood out to you today? what do these classrooms make possible for our community, and how can we join with these educators and students to amplify this work. So let us know if you have this. If you're curious about next steps, again, we have our website that you can learn how to get involved with us. We always want to see community members in our classrooms. I just got a text from one of y'all that's like, I want to be a mentor. Like, again, we can't do this work. I can't stress enough. We cannot do this work enough without the community support. Again, it has to be community members, students, teachers, administrator. It takes a village. We all have to do this together. I see 2 more comments. Celeste saying that she really likes the idea of amped representation on the Policy and Procedures Handbook Committee, and then Malcolm being thankful that he's part of this community. All right. Any other final thoughts that we have that we want to share? Well then, again, thank you all so much. I want to turn it over now for a few closing words from Anna and Destiny.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thanks everybody. I don't know about you all, but if my camera had been on through this, you would have seen, just the absolute joy on my face as we heard from students and teachers in Humanities Amped. It's incredible, just the vision and just what happens, I think, when we step back and we let the people who really are the experts in their own experiences grapple with these questions. And, I want to thank all of the educators and students that have been that are part of our work, not just today and not just who you saw here today, but just this is ongoing. This is every single day. We wake up with our minds on freedom every day. And, you've got the courage to collectively grapple, and you're bravely dreaming in public. And I'm just in nonstop awe of the wisdom and commitment that you make visible, and how you show up again and again, sometimes in ways that are very much not visible to the larger world, to build safe havens in which others can also dream and take action together. And, so thank you to the young people and to the educators that are helping us to do this work, or that are doing this work, really.
Yes, and thank you to our sponsors for making their work possible. So again, thank you to Big Buddy, to the Recast, to the Wilson Foundation, and especially East Baton Rouge Parish School System. We cannot sustain this work without your support. These plans will not be realized without your continued support. So we really appreciate you standing with us. Thank you so much to our amazing MC, Dr. Alex Torres. And thank you to Dr. Dave Stovall for showing up and framing the conversation for us today. It's always good to have you with us.
Yeah, we just want to thank everybody that took the time to join us today. And of course, like on many other days, I just want to shout out like some of the people who are here in the audience who really, we have a lot of godparents. Humanities Amped, none of this happens alone. Like, we got a lot of people looking out for us. First, I want to give a shout out to some of the East Baton Rouge Parish School System folks who are here today. I learned a long time ago that leadership is a practice of listening first and foremost, and showing up and creating spaces to listen to folks. And, I don't know if y'all realize, but, Associate Superintendent Ben Nikes has been here listening with us today. And that's what leadership looks like. Evelyn Ware Jackson, school board member, and, somebody that comes into our classes regularly and listens, also here today listening with us, our friends at ABL, Andover Breadloaf with us, Lou and Umi, Jerry Hobdy I saw was on the call, somebody that always is looking out for us, Jose Aviles from LSU, Daryl Blacher from Recast, so many of our friends and supporters, from all over the community. And we just really are thankful that we've got this group of people. Your presence, everyone's presence here gives us hope that what we do is part of a large web of people pushing and dreaming together. Your contributions give us hope that a just, inclusive, and engaging public school system is possible, not only here in Baton Rouge, but really across this nation.
And now, Broadmoor Apprentice leader Anna Silas will share a poem that is very near and dear to the Humanities Amped community.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Okay. From the elders of the Hopi Nation, to my fellow swimmers, here is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid, who will try to hold onto the shore. They are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. Know the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, and keep our heads above water. And I say, see who is there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. From the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey comes to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred. I can't see the rest. Okay, in a sacred manner and in celebration, for we are the ones we have been waiting for.
Thank you so much, Anna. And again, thank you everyone for coming. All of the presentations you saw today are on humanities.amp.com. Also, shoot us emails. We're always wanting to hear back from y'all. So shoot us emails, go to the website, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks for coming.